Pull up your electric bill from this time last year and put it next to the one that just landed. If your stomach dropped a little, you are not imagining it and you are not bad with money. The average American household is now paying about 17.5 cents for every kilowatt hour of power, which is up more than 7% in a single year and up about 36% since 2020. That makes electricity one of the fastest growing costs in your entire life right now, climbing faster than almost anything else you pay for. And here is the part nobody put on the bill. A big slice of that increase is not lighting your kitchen or running your air conditioner at all. It is feeding the machines behind artificial intelligence, plugged straight into the same power grid you share, with the cost quietly pushed onto your bill instead of theirs. So let me show you exactly how that happened, who is making money off it, and the simple moves that put you on the winning side of this instead of the losing one. Because there is a way to win here, and most families have no idea it exists yet. Here is what is really going on. Every time you ask an AI to write an email, generate an image, or answer a question, that request runs inside a giant building called a data center. Picture a windowless warehouse the size of several football fields, packed wall to wall with computer servers, all running hot, all running constantly, all drinking electricity 24 hours a day. These places are unbelievably hungry. Data centers drove roughly half of all the growth in US electricity demand last year. Half. From basically one industry, and it is just getting started. Bloom Energy put out a forecast in January saying US data center demand is on track to nearly double between 2025 and 2028, jumping from around 80 gigawatts to around 150. To put that in plain terms, by 2028 data centers could be eating up about 12% of all the electricity in the entire country. S&P Global expects data center demand on the grid to nearly triple by 2030. This is the single biggest new pull on American power in a generation, and it landed on the grid almost overnight. Let me put that growth into perspective, because the speed of it is the whole story. Back in 2023, data centers were using around 4% of all US electricity. By 2030, depending on how fast the build-out goes, they could be using anywhere from 4.5% to over 9%. In other words, this one industry might more than double its share of the entire nation's power in just a few years. And when a customer that size suddenly muscles into a fixed supply, prices do not nudge, they jump. The Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas ran the math and estimated that as data center demand doubles over the next 5 years or so, wholesale power prices, the price your utility pays before it ever reaches you, could climb by as much as 50%. 50%. That is not a rounding error. That is the cost of your electricity at the source potentially rising by half, and you can probably guess where that lands. Now, here is the question that matters for your wallet. When a brand new customer this big shows up and starts pulling that much power, who pays to keep the lights on for everyone? Because the grid was not built for this. So the power companies have to spend enormous amounts building new lines, new plants, new substations, new everything to feed these centers. And that spending does not come out of thin air. It gets spread across the rates, which means it gets spread across you. And here is the quiet part that makes it work. When you sign up for power, you do not get to negotiate. You cannot shop around the way you would for a car or a phone plan. You are a captive customer, and so is your neighbor, and so is everyone in your region. So when the grid needs billions in upgrades to feed a wave of new industrial demand, the utility does not eat that cost, and the data center does not fully eat it either. It gets folded into the rates that everybody pays, line by line, month after month, in a way that almost nobody notices because it never shows up labeled as what it actually is. There is no line on your bill that says, this part is for the AI boom. It just shows up as a slightly bigger number every single month. Let me give you the numbers, because this is where it stops being abstract. There is a market most people have never heard of called the PJM capacity auction. PJM runs the grid for 13 states plus Washington, D.C., so if you live anywhere from Illinois to Virginia to New Jersey, this is your power. Every year they hold an auction to lock in enough electricity for the future. And recently that auction slammed straight into its price cap. $333.44 per megawatt day. That is the legal ceiling, the absolute most it is allowed to charge, and it hit that ceiling for the third auction in a row. The total bill came to $16.4 billion, and data centers alone accounted for 40% of that, about $6.5 billion. Guess who covers the rest? The Natural Resources Defense Council ran the math and estimated households across those 13 states could end up paying around $163 billion more over time. For a typical family, that works out to roughly $70 a month in extra electricity costs. $70 a month for power you are not even using. That is the kind of number that makes accountants cry. And this is not a someday problem. In Baltimore, the average bill already jumped more than $17 a month after those record auctions. In Virginia, where data centers are thickest, one resident watched their bill hit $281 in January, up from around $100 the month before. The official forecast for the country says residential electricity prices will rise about 5% in 2026, with even bigger jumps coming in 2027, and the East Coast getting hit the hardest. Electricity sales are up about 2.6% nationally, but in Texas and the areas around it, they are up over 9%. Driven by data centers and crypto mining. And US utilities asked for more than $29 billion in rate increases in just the first half of last year. That is double what they asked for the year before. You would think someone would have raised the alarm. For most families, nobody did. So who is paying and who is profiting? You are paying. The household is paying. 1 in 6 American households, around 21.5 million families, are already behind on their energy bills. Let that number land for a second. 21.5 million homes struggling to keep up before this wave has even fully hit. About 4 million of them faced having their power shut off entirely last year. And the squeeze is not even across the board. For lower-income families, energy now eats up close to 9% of their income compared to about 3% for everyone else. So the people with the least margin are carrying the most weight just as the bill climbs. And the timing could not be worse. This summer is expected to run hotter, with households using more electricity than in any of the last 5 summers. More heat means more air conditioning, which means more demand on a grid that is already stretched, which means higher bills landing right when people can least afford to skip running the AC. Meanwhile, the safety net that used to help with this is on shaky ground. The Federal Low-Income Energy Assistance Program, the one that helps families keep the lights and the cooling on, is in trouble. The entire staff that ran it was laid off last spring. Roughly $378 million in funding sits unreleased, and the White House budget even proposed eliminating the program altogether, though Congress has not gone along with that. So the bill goes up at the exact moment the cushion underneath it gets thinner. You would think someone would be sounding the alarm about that. For the families living it, mostly nobody is. If all of this is starting to feel familiar, that is because we have seen this movie before, and the ending is worth knowing. Rewind to California, the year 2000. The state had deregulated its electricity market back in the 90s, opening it up to private players with the promise that competition would keep prices low for everyone. For a while it sounded great, then it went sideways fast. Over just 9 months, wholesale power prices rose around 800% between April and December. Read that as written. 800%. Some electricity sold for up to 20 times the normal rate. Rolling blackouts swept the state, shutting off neighborhoods at a time. On one single day in January of 2001, about 1 million households lost power. And the cruelest part was that a lot of it was not even real scarcity. Part of what made the crisis so brutal was deliberate market manipulation, most famously by Enron, which created artificial shortages on purpose to drive prices up and cash in. A captive grid, a few players chasing profit, and millions of ordinary customers with no way to opt out. By the time the dust finally settled, Californians had paid an estimated $5.5 billion above the actual cost of the power. $5.5 billion straight out of regular people's pockets for power that should have cost a fraction of that. And here is the lesson, the one that connects directly to your bill today. When you take expensive new infrastructure, add a small group of players looking to profit, and point all of it at a grid that ordinary people cannot opt out of, it is the regular ratepayer who foots the bill. Captive customers always do. The names change, the technology changes, but the shape of the deal stays exactly the same. So let me ask you something. If a wave this big is going to lift somebody, why not you? Because that is the part of this story that actually puts you back in control, and almost nobody is talking about it. Before I get into exactly how, do me one quick favor. If this is helping you finally understand what is happening to your money, hit that subscribe button. We break down a story like this every single day, the stuff actually hitting your wallet in plain English with no jargon. Subscribe and you will not miss tomorrow's. Now, let me show you who wins, because somebody always does. Think about it for a second. All that electricity these data centers need has to be made and sold by someone, and that someone is the power producers and utility companies. The exact same demand wave that is raising your bill is a multi-year tailwind for the companies that generate and deliver electricity. Wall Street figured this out a while ago. On May 18th, two giants, NextEra and Dominion, announced a $67 billion merger to build what would be the largest utility in the world, aimed squarely at powering the AI boom. And the market reaction told you everything. On the news, Dominion stock jumped 9%, while NextEra slipped about 5%, the classic move when a big company is the one doing the buying. And get this, data centers already made up about 28% of Dominion's electricity sales in Virginia last year, with requests on the books for 47 gigawatts more. That is not a maybe, that is demand already lined up at the door, signed and waiting. There are other names in this same race. Companies like Constellation and Vistra are considered the cleaner pure-play power producers, the ones whose whole business is generating electricity. Back in January, Vistra signed a 20-year deal to power Meta with nuclear energy, more than 2 gigawatts of it locked in for 2 decades. Think about what that means. A tech giant just guaranteed a power producer 20 years of revenue because it knows the AI race runs on electricity and it cannot afford to run short. NextEra alone is sitting on a pipeline of around 21 gigawatts of data center power waiting to be served. These are not fly-by-night bets. These are the companies quietly positioned to sell the exact thing the whole world suddenly needs more of, and the contracts to prove it are already being signed. So step back and look at the whole picture. On one side, you have households, captive customers, absorbing a rising bill they never agreed to and can barely see. On the other side, you have the utilities and power producers, with decades of locked-in demand and stock prices the market is rewarding. The cost flows one way and the profit flows the other. That is the wealth transfer hiding inside your electric bill. And the good news, the part that actually matters for you, is that the second side is not some closed club. It is open to anyone willing to pay attention. So here is the move, and I want to be clear, this is education, not financial advice. You cannot stop your bill from going up, but you do not have to just stand there and absorb it either. There are 3 simple things you can do. First, you can own a slice of the winners. The same utility and power companies profiting from this boom are available to anyone through a basic brokerage account, often through a single broad utility or energy fund, so you are not betting the house on one name. If your power bill is going to fund this boom, you might as well own a small piece of what it is funding. Second, attack the bill itself. Shift your heaviest power use, laundry, dishwasher, charging, away from the expensive peak hours of the late afternoon and early evening when the grid is strained and rates climb. Many areas charge you more during those windows, so moving that usage is real money back in your pocket. Third, lock in efficiency now, before next summer's heat and the next round of increases hit. Sealing up drafts, adjusting your thermostat, swapping to efficient bulbs and appliances. None of it is exciting, but it permanently lowers the base you are paying on, year after year, no matter what the auction does. Those 3 things and you flip the whole script. Instead of being the family that just quietly pays more every month while a handful of companies profit, you become the household that saw the wave coming, trimmed the cost, and grabbed a piece of the upside. Same exact news, completely different outcome. The only difference is whether you act on it. So let me bring this all the way back. Your bill is up, and now you know it is not just inflation, and it is not just you. It is the biggest new demand on the American grid in a generation, and right now the cost is being quietly handed to ordinary families. California already showed us how this plays out when a captive grid meets a few players chasing profit. But you are not powerless here. You can see exactly what is coming, you can shrink what you pay, and you can own a slice of the very wave that is driving it. The real question was never whether your bill would go up. It is which side of this shift you choose to stand on. That is the whole story, and you are now ahead of almost everyone you know on it. We do this every single day, taking the headline that just hit your wallet and turning it into something you can actually use. So hit subscribe, keep that money working for you instead of against you, and I will see you tomorrow.